Electric cars are a relatively modern invention, right? Something from maybe the 90s? The year is 1890, and an American chemist by the name of William Morrison invented the first practical mass-produced electric vehicle.
His EV was a four-wheeled, six-passenger wagon capable of 14 miles an hour, which, at the time, that was some blistering speed.
It also had a driving range of about 100 miles, which still to this day is actually decently impressive. 1890. You didn't know that electric cars went back that far, did you? Well, they actually go back even farther than that, into around the 1860s. But those cars weren't really mass-produced or practical. Those ones were mostly just prototypes and experiments.
Electric power almost beat out gasoline internal combustion engines in the early days. By 1900, New York had a fleet of over 60 electric taxis. Nearly a third of all vehicles on the road at that time were electric, and sales of electric cars were strong.
So what happened? Why does it seem like EVs completely disappeared until more recently?
The nail in the electric car coffin was the Ford Model T. It was affordable at the time with a price tag of around $650, while an electric car was around $1,750, a hefty increase over what most folks wanted to pay. In 1912, the electric starter was introduced, eliminating the need for the hand crank. That, by itself, was a huge boon to gasoline-powered cars. By the 1920s, America's road network was expanding and improved. People wanted to get out and explore. Crude oil was discovered in Texas. Gas became cheap, and filling stations dotted the entire country. Gas-powered cars became affordable, easy, and available to go anywhere. Few Americans outside of the big cities had electricity, so for everyone else, the EV was not a viable option. The electric vehicle had a short heyday, and while it looks like it was killed off, it never completely died.
Automakers from around the world have tinkered with electric cars for decades, but none of them have been majorly successful until Tesla came around.
NANI?! お前はもう死んでいる。
We're going to talk about a few of these electric cars that were supposed to be the future, but ultimately failed.
Maybe saying that they failed is too harsh. Instead, I should say automakers have attempted EVs with varying success. Now that we covered the ancient history on electric cars, we're going to jump over to modern history. Welcome to the 90s. EVs started showing up again and looking to become potentially mainstream. Maybe. The demand wasn't quite there yet, but the technology was, so car makers did more dabbling in the EV business. BMW took a stab at it and unveiled their E1 concept car at the 1991 Frankfurt Auto Show. It showcased their electric vehicle technology, but BMW claims that they never planned to mass-produce the E1. It was just a showpiece for an engineering exercise. While mostly just a showpiece, the car was fully functional, usable, and a good platform for furthering EV tech. Unfortunately, attention was shifted away from the technological possibilities over to safety. The only E1 caught fire during a charging session, and not only did the fire destroy the car, it also damaged a building. The damages by the blaze made BMW decide to put the entire electric drive program on the back burner. Hey. Actually, BMW decided to temporarily quit electric car technologies and instead focused on hydrogen internal combustion engines. Starting in 1996, GM gave us the ugliest EV ever, and maybe that was actually part of their plan. There's rumors that GM never wanted this electric car to be successful, so why would they make it? Was it destined to be a scrapped project from the very beginning? I don't know what the real answer is, and we may never know, but it certainly is suspicious. Here's the story of the EV1. In 1996, GM offered a select few California and Arizona residents 3-year, 30,000 miles leases on about 1,000 EV1s. When the EV1 leases finished, GM collected all of them and had most of them crushed. This was to avoid liability issues and parts availability regulations. Sounds simple enough, however people actually liked the car and didn't want them crushed. Weird, right? People like driving functional vehicles. Ugly, yes, but otherwise a normal functioning car. Folks offered a lot of money to buy the cars. In fact, they loved the car so much that they raised $1.9 million and offered it to GM so that they would keep the EV1s on the road. GM never responded. All but a few were sent to the crusher. General Motors claimed that there wasn't enough interest in the car, not enough demand to justify continuing development, building, and maintaining the EV1, even though there was a growing waiting list of buyers. Some people say Big Oil shut down the electric car, or that it was the administration at the time subsidizing SUVs. We might never know what the real answer is, but perhaps it was a little bit of all those things. The EV1 didn't have to fail, but it would appear that it was predetermined to fail. Maybe the next decade would have better luck. Though vastly overshadowed by the intriguing Tesla Roadster, at nearly the same time, Dodge showed off its EV, the Dodge Circuit. Both cars were extremely similar, but the Tesla managed to get all the headlines. We have to remember that the Circuit should have had as good as a chance to succeed as the Roadster, because Tesla was new to the mass production scene. There was a very good chance that they'd fail, whereas a well-established company like Dodge would succeed. Yet, that's not what happened. The Dodge Circuit EV was built from a Lotus Europa, with some modification. The powertrain had been swapped to a 268 horsepower, 450 pound-foot electric motor with a large 35 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. The Circuit was one of a few cars in Chrysler's ENVY program, a program dedicated to developing hybrid and EV technology. Circuit looked like a promising electric car. It was actually attractive, unlike the funky-looking nerd EVs of the past. It handled well, it was quick and fun, and had a well-appointed interior. It had all the form and function as a regular gas-burning car, and Chrysler had every intention of selling the Circuit EV. So why didn't they? Unfortunately, it was due to bad timing and low projected profitability. See, this was right after the economic crash of 2008, which really hurt the automotive industry. Chrysler filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2009. The US government bailed them out, but under some conditions. That being, several new joint owners of the company. The new partnership was shared between Fiat, United Auto Workers Pension Fund, the US and Canadian government. Since Fiat was now a large piece in the Chrysler ownership pie, they could make decisions and change the company's direction. Fiat looked at the ENVY program and saw it as a loss. They urgently needed to get Chrysler profitable, so the entire ENVY program was disbanded, along with the Circuit EV. This car may have offered stiff competition to the Tesla Roadster, but alas, we'll never know. Besides the Tesla Roadster, did anyone else have better success with electric cars in the early 2010s? Enter the Mini E. Unlike some of the others, you can see that this wasn't a new design, just a Mini Cooper stuffed full of batteries and an electric motor. Not particularly intriguing, but still a good idea. A good idea to take a car that people already liked and make it electric. It remained like your basic old Mini, but a wee bit faster, a whole lot quieter, and a whole lot less room in the interior. All those trick electronic things take up a ton of space. The Mini E was deployed for field testing in 2009 and sent all across the globe to places such as the US, the UK, Germany, France, Japan, and China. It was part of BMW's Project I, which later resulted in the creation of the mass-produced i3. The Mini E had an AC permanent magnet electric motor providing 200 horsepower and 162 pound-feet, and a 35 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. It had a lackluster range of around 100 miles on a full charge, and if you have a heavy foot, that 100-mile range would be cut down quick. There wasn't much reason to force this car to hustle though, as its 0 to 60 time was only a touch above 8 seconds. Like the EV1, the Mini was acquired through leasing and for only select customers. In the United States, 450 LA and New York customers got the car, even though over 9,500 people had initially signed up for it. With this program of leasing over 500 all-electric cars around the world, It allowed BMW to become the first major car maker to deploy such a large fleet of only electric vehicles for private use. Unlike the EV1, the Mini E's end wasn't so tragic. After the leases, some were sent out as museum pieces, some sent back to Germany for further testing. The ones in the UK were kept as promotional vehicles and displayed in London's 2012 Olympic Games. The others remaining were dismantled and crushed. The Mini E was a step in the right direction, but far from perfect, and BMW knew that. That's why they never mass-produced and sold it to the general public. It was merely a useful experiment that had plenty of flaws to iron out in order to be competitive in an ever-growing market. The chief complaints about the car was that its short range of only around 100 miles and incredibly slow charging time of 24 hours on 110 volt. A 3-hour lightning box for quick charge was available, but it had to be specially wired into your garage. Also, the interior lost most of its usable space, so it wasn't nearly as practical for grocery getting. And finally, it was heavy and kinda slow. No frills, no thrills.
Now this next car isn't fully electric, it's technically a hybrid, but I do have to give it an honorable mention for being the biggest, almost success. Past the hype, it flopped pretty hard.
This car is of course the Fisker Karma. It was a $100,000 luxury hybrid that stunned onlookers with its dastardly good looks. However, the longer you stare at it, the weirder it starts to look. You realize its proportions are strange, its face is odd, and the wheels are too gigantic. It sported a 2-liter turbocharged gas engine from GM and mated to 2 electric motors, giving the car a combined 400 horsepower and a decent 0 to 60 time of around 6 seconds. The Karma experienced major battery supply issues on top of dismal sales. Production of this car was ceased after just 1 year, and only about 2,500 units made. After Fisker went belly up, prices for these plummeted. You can get one relatively cheap, but that doesn't mean you should. The Fisker story is actually a fascinating one, but for a different video. Nowadays, we all recognize Tesla as the electric car leader without paying much attention to the interesting history of all the struggle and failed attempts by other various car makers. Electric vehicles aren't the solution to our problems, but it's worth going back in time and seeing how much it's improved and how much we've learned. I genuinely hope you enjoyed this video and learned a few things. I even learned some things while doing research for this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and liking my video. I put many hours into creating these and would love to earn your subscription. Thanks for watching. See you next time.